Basically,
Yeah.
we are being manipulated. We are tools in a system of enemy making. That's the way I see it. And it's not like everybody on the other side at the high level is intentionally enemy making. Some of them really believe it. But some of them, a lot of them, understand that if I create enemies, I have power, both in media and in politics. The common people of the enemy are not the enemy. They're just us on the other side. Like the fact that we would think of them as enemies is almost ridiculous once we get to know them. And so that's the goal, is to get people to not know who they are and to not know what they believe. And once they have that, they are kind of both people at the same time. And they kind of come to love the other person.
Hey, this is Kevin from Meditation Magazine. I'm here with Larry Rosen from the Enemies Project, which is an amazing new YouTube channel that I think just started about a month ago and has already been exploding in popularity. I've seen they've gained thousands and thousands of subscribers on YouTube, on Instagram, because what they're doing is really, really important for the world. What they're doing is bringing together enemies, or, supposed enemies, to have conversations with one another that are really well-structured conversations that Larry moderates, that they start out by having sort of political argument, and then seeing that that doesn't really lead anywhere, they lead into talking about their own personal lives, getting some empathy flowing, and then once they realize that they're not enemies, then they can start talking about why these political issues matter to them, and then really get into each other's shoes and really sit in each other's place. And through these really beautifully structured conversations, they're actually realizing that they're not enemies, and that they have more in common than they thought. And I think that this is perhaps the way to heal some of the polarization in our country. I have been working on the new issue of Meditation Magazine, and I think that Larry can provide some insight into how we can help to reduce polarization in our country as well, and how we can make this a great issue of Meditation Magazine. So thank you, Larry, for being here. I really appreciate you and your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Larry is currently in Italy, so we may have some connection issues, but hopefully it will flow smoothly. And I want to just give you, Larry, a little bit of context about how I've been approaching this issue so far, and get your thoughts on, a good way to approach it, a good thesis that we can start with. We did the peace issue in 2024 because of what was happening at that time. There was, the main public consciousness was about the war in Ukraine and in the Middle East. And, there is, of course, other wars going on in the world, but those were the ones that were on the minds of many of our readers. So we wanted to address those things. And the theses that we sort of found through the interviews that we did for that issue were, one, that violence doesn't create peace, or generally, and nonviolence is a better way to create peace. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way. And the second thesis was that we often feel powerless as individuals in the face of the huge conflicts in the world to be able to do anything, to be able to make any impact. But what we can realize is that each of us as individuals can bring peace into our selves and into our our families and our communities, and spreading out in ripples, starting with ourselves. So that thesis was peace begins with me. And in this issue of the 2025 issue, we're looking for something that's more close to home, that is addressing the situation in the United States in 2025, which some people are seeing as moving into fascism, and some people are seeing as moving into a golden age And there is this huge gap in between those groups, this extreme polarization. And I think that that polarization is a huge problem. And it's creating a lot of division. And but at the same time, personally, being from one of those bubbles, I the growing up in New York, and I come from this bubble where it seems like we are moving into fascism, and I get kind of like, oh, maybe that's the problem that needs to be addressed. So I'm a little bit confused. Do we address the fascism issue, or do we address the polarization issue? I feel it's hard to do both at the same time. So
Hmm.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I want to get into that with you. Um, yeah. So I guess maybe that's a good place to start. It's a very, very deep question to start at. Let's get
So
into that in a few minutes, though, if we can. Let's get into it in a few minutes. I want to ask you about yourself first, if that's okay. Is that all right?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start with yeah. How did you become a peacemaker? Because you've been doing these interviews with conversations, facilitating conversations between Israeli and Palestinian, between anti-abortion and pro-abortion activists, between people that are the one that you're about to release, the Proud Boy and the Tree Hugger. Your daughter sent it over to me to preview, and it's wonderful. How do you know how to facilitate these things? Like, where did all this wisdom and knowledge come from?
Well, it's a long path, like anybody who works professionally, they've done a lot to get to the spot where they're working on a particular project. But for me, I've been a mediator for decades, and that's all I do. And I'm a legal mediator, but I only work with individuals who have a pre-existing relationship, who are basically fighting over legal stuff because their relationship is broken, and so it's really painful for them. And I've wanted to take that work to a broader audience, in part because of what's happening in our world. And my theory was, and it was just a theory, that what I do on an individual level will also apply to the political world, because people are people, and what they're wanting for themselves doesn't change, whether it's in this personal relationship or in this political relationship. They're wanting something for themselves and for the people they love. And so my belief was that the process would be, or my ability to help people connect with each other would be the same. So my experience, it seemed to me would apply, and
Yeah,
I had to change it up, definitely, for what I'm doing now in terms of making it interesting for the audience. But the process of helping people connect with each other is pretty much the same from issue to issue.
wow. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess did when you were doing the mediation, and I saw that you had a law degree from UCLA, and you've been doing this for a long time, the mediation. When you do that, is it sort of the same kind of structure of conversation? Like, hey, let's start with the issues and that you're dealing with, and then go into connecting personally of what's going on in your lives, and then
It's actually quite different, because I encourage people, the people I work with professionally, where I get paid as opposed to this project. Um, those people know each other. And so I don't really have to establish a common foundation for them in terms of their connection with each other. The problem is their connection is broken. And so it's a much quicker process, actually, if I'm going to just help them reestablish a relationship. It's really just one question, which is, what does the other person not understand that you wish they understood?
uh,
And that question will help them heal the rift. And once they heal the rift, then we go into the legal issues, then we go into how to resolve those issues.
hmm,
In the enemies project, I'm working with people who don't know each other and who are political enemies. And for
yes,
those people, for them to connect with each other, they have to understand who the other person is first. They're not healing something. They never had something between the two of them personally. And so I am helping them establish a relationship, not reestablish a relationship. And that was a difference in the process. It's a really enriching difference. I really enjoy it, helping them understand what's important to the other person. And I really enjoyed thinking about developing what they need to know about each other in order for them to deeply connect with each other.
So how did you develop that? How did you develop that? It's sort of like a it seems like a four-part process, right? There's the conversation about the politics that shows them that that doesn't work. Then there's the sort of personal understanding each other personally. Then there's um, the next step is
the next step is,
why is this important? Why is this important to you, right? And then the last step is the identity
why are the
confusion.
politics important to you? Yeah, and
Yeah.
then they step into each other's shoes. The first part, which is I let them argue, I encourage them to. That is something that in mediation I would not do, not to a great extent. And when I did my first episode, it was a gun control episode. I did not encourage the people to argue. I had two women, one of whom her father was a gunsmith, and she was anti-gun. She was Hispanic, partially white, but her children were black, and she was very concerned about the impact on them and their relationship to the police. And then there was another woman who was really concerned about her safety, a young woman who was concerned about her safety and was very pro Second Amendment. And I started out with, just wanting them to connect, because I didn't have enough confidence in myself and in my process to reestablish things if everything came apart. I didn't, and it's not my practice in mediation to encourage that to happen. And the process went beautifully. They connected, they loved each other, they thought that they were going to change the world together. And I will ultimately air that episode, but it's boring. And that was a problem from my perspective. Not only was the beginning not dramatic, but the ending wasn't dramatic, because they hadn't really displayed their differences. And not only not dramatic, it wasn't as deep as when the people are really deeply in their core argument and they're not afraid to expose it. So I then changed it. And I realized that both for many reasons, I had to allow them to really get into this stuff. One of them was because my belief, I'm doing this to educate the audience. That's my purpose. That the common people on the other side, the common people of the enemy, are not the enemy. They're just us on the other side. Like the fact that we would think of them as enemies is almost ridiculous once we get to know them. That was my purpose, and I'll tell you politically why that is in a moment. But I had to. I just lost where I was. I'm sorry. I had to.
You're trying to get them to not see each other as enemies.
Yeah. So, but I had to allow them basically. So the purpose of me having them argue at the beginning was one, to allow them to authentically be themselves. And I encouraged them to share the judgments that they would share with their friends if they were alone about the other side. But more importantly, I've found, so be yourself. More importantly is that your own side, you'll have no legitimacy with them if you're too kind to the other side. So to really bring in the audience, not just from a dramatic standpoint, but from a in-group standpoint, you're one of my people. I really needed them to share their judgment, their strong judgments with the other side, and their deep skepticism of the other side. And then lastly, not only is it more dramatic, but it's more penetrating, the resolution. When you see people who apparently hate each other, like in the trans episode, it's pretty clear that these people, or at least one person, detests the other person. So the resolution is very, very penetrating. And so that's the first part. I have them argue, whereas I wouldn't typically in a mediation where people know each other. The second piece was, how do I get people to really know each other. So we then leave that conversation behind. We see that didn't work, and in no case does it work. When you have people arguing out there, they have the same argument that you hear online, the same rhetoric, and the same lack of understanding. And so we demonstrate that for 10 minutes or so. Really, in my presence, it's an hour and a half that we do that, but we cut it down. And then the next part of the process is I want them to get to know each other. So let's leave politics aside. And that's where it got, for me, something new was, how do I get these people to know each other who don't know each other, and do it relatively quickly? And that was a really interesting kind of project for me. I didn't have to experiment very long. I mean, it was pretty clear to me when thinking about it for a few days what I would ask them. And basically I asked them what I consider to be two of the most important questions in my life and in getting to know somebody that I would want to know, which is what's beautiful in your world? Tell me about what's beautiful. And that tells you all about the person's hopes and dreams for their life, and who's important to them, and what's important to them. And not just, and we don't just discuss then what is beautiful, but we go deeply into why, into their experiences of these things that are beautiful, or these people that are beautiful. And then the other piece that is the reciprocal of that is what experiences have you had that have been really traumatic? What are the hardest experiences of your life, or the hardest experience? And when people share that really opens up the other side. Like, you can just see the vitriol kind of melt, and they're now looking at the other person as a real person. They weren't before. The other person was a cartoon. They were an image of a person. But now with these two pieces, they're really starting to see the other person as a real person. And then I asked them a couple of other questions about what wisdom would they offer if they were on their deathbed, and what are they most proud of that they've achieved in their life. And all this group of questions, and I'm sure there could be others, really gets them to know each other, and they feel kind of close. And at that point, we can then go back to politics, which is part 3, where I then ask them basically, how does politics relate to these things that are so important in their life? And the things that they're talking about that are beautiful in their life are almost, and the most painful experiences are almost always the same from person to person, which is the people in their lives. Now, it could be different types of relationships, but what they're trying to protect through their politics is what's beautiful in their life. And the most painful experiences are unquestionably the stripping away of that gift that they thought was beautiful in their life. It's all related. And so when we get back to the
that was
politics,
going to happen? How did you know that was going to happen? Because like, when I see that, I'm like, this is a genius process. Like, how did he know that was going to happen? Like, maybe he has some training about it, or did you just figure it out that, like, you kind of knew intuitively?
Yeah. I mean, I did know, and I knew it from doing thousands of mediations, that what is important in people's lives in one realm is important in the other. It's all what's. The what is unimportant, really. It's the why that is important, and that carries from experience to experience to experience, and people generally don't know that. So I figured that was likely the case, and it is. I mean, it's proven to be the case every time that the reason that they're so deeply interested in politics is the same that we had explored when we were going deep. And now they can really explore that with the other person. They can hear from the other person why the politics matter. And what we always find is that they want the same things in the world, or pretty much, but that they have different beliefs about how to get there. One person may believe that totalitarianism is caused by censorship, and they're conservative, and they believe that the left really censors thought. And that's what's going to lead to totalitarianism. And another person might believe that totalitarianism, we're going to end up there by keeping out people who have by crunching down on people who have very few rights. already. But they have a similar concern that the government or the people in charge are going to be massively oppressive. And they're
mm,
concerned about the people in their lives being oppressed.
mm,
So and you can trace that back to what they were talking about when they were talking about the beauty in their life and the hardest experiences. So it really is a beautiful kind of unfolding.
mm.
And then after we complete that kind of chapter 3, we go to chapter 4, which is them assuming each other's roles and basically role playing as the other person and observing the other person role play themselves. And that's where it goes really deep. And they kind of have a transformation. It's not that they shift positions, like they don't necessarily change their views, because they still have the same beliefs that they had about the world. Like, the thing that I'm worried about, these chain of events might lead to it, but they stop viewing the other person as an enemy. Like, wow, like a guy like me who's on the other side of this whole crap. And they
Mm.
almost all talk about that. Like, wow, we got trapped by this structure somehow. How did we find ourselves in this?
Yeah. So yeah, just as a meditation facilitator and somebody who tries to, bring peace between people, I'm just very impressed with your intuition and your skill in doing this, because when I'm doing these types of conversations, I didn't think to structure it in this type of way, and it doesn't lead to the profound transformations. At least in some of the recent interactions that I've had, it haven't led to the types of profound transformations I've seen on your channel. And so first, I just want to ask you about the last section, right? Section 4, where they assume each other's roles. In and so it's kind of like role playing, but it's deeper than role playing. How did you know that that was going to be such an important part? Because it seems confusing. The rest of the structure is very simple. It's like,
Yeah.
you're kind of like, okay, let's have an argument. Okay, let's talk about each other, like ourselves. Like, okay, let's talk about why things matter. But then the last one is like, it's literally called identity confusion in your channel, because and people I saw in the one with the Proud Boy and the tree hugger, like they were like visibly like confused, like, wait, who am I supposed to be now? It's like, and you knew somehow that even though it was confusing, or perhaps because it's confusing, that it was going to be really helpful. How did you know that? Did you have some experience with this type of technique before,
Well,
or did you
yeah,
figure it
no,
out
that
somehow
that
intuitively?
technique I did not make up.
Mm,
So the rest of it, all the lead into that, but I've been using that for decades. When it's kind of my go-to to have people switch positions and advocate for the other person without
mm,
mockery, and when I can't find resolution between people. So it's kind of complex, the how this fits into the law and legal issues. So I probably won't go there. But in some mediations, it's really important to figure out exactly what the issues are that people are disagreeing with. Like, you might have work with someone for 20 hours, but now we're down to two little issues, two little things, or six of them that are all not like neatly tied together, and you can't figure out how to resolve these all. But now we're aware of all the things that are outstanding that people are disagreeing with. And I don't ask them to resolve those. What I ask them is, what doesn't the other person understand about you that you want them to understand? Because it's never about actually these issues, all this crap that's all hanging together, and it's what the other person doesn't understand about you that you've been in pain about. And so we go through that process, and then I have them switch roles. And that will almost always resolve it once they switch roles.
So you've got all this experience with the mediations where you have them switch roles, and you've seen it resolve so many things. So that's kind of why you realized or
Right.
assumed or
You can only use it
intuited that this
once,
would
though.
work.
Right. You can only
You
use
can
it
only use it
once.
once.
Like,
Hmm.
you can't do it throughout with all these little sub issues. I save it for the end. And I don't use it in all of my mediations. I use it probably in, I don't know, 20%, because in 80% it's not needed. But when it's really needed, that's when people will have enormous breakthroughs. And what's really important when they switch roles, they advocate for each other. But what the confusing part is that I also, like, if you and I switched roles, you would be playing me, but I'd be playing you listening to me.
Mm,
That's the confusing part. I'd be playing
mm,
you listening to me, and I'm having to reflect back as you back to me. That's the confusing part, where people are like, I don't even know who I am anymore. But that's the really powerful part, because once you stop remembering who you are, you lose all attachment, and you
mm,
and you you lose attachment, and you also don't know what your own beliefs are anymore. And my
mm,
belief is that people's beliefs are, I said this in the totalitarianism episode that you watched, that we don't choose our beliefs, they choose us. It's not like I chose to believe what I believe. And I can assume, if I can assume your beliefs, I can actually be you. And
mm,
and so that's the goal, is to get people to not know who they are and to not know what they believe. And once they have that, they are kind of both people at the same time. And they kind of come to love the other person. And while the goal of the Enemies Project is not to have them solve the issues of the world, like, I expressly relieve them of the responsibility of figuring out solutions, because who's going to buy their solutions, and we're not going to figure out the solutions. In mediation, when I'm with private parties, the goal is to figure out solutions to the issues.
mm,
By occupying themselves and the other person at the same time, they solve the issue, because they're never doing that. Intellectually, they might be trying to figure out a solution, but they're never themselves and the other person at the same time in real life. But when you
mm,
can get them to be both people, they then, their minds, their hearts, their brains, whatever you want to call it, are solving for a much more complex issue, which is my needs and your needs at the same time. And usually I'm solving for my needs and trying to deflect your needs. Except early on in a relationship, when we really, really want it to work for both people, once the other person starts to be a problem, we start to solve for our own needs only. And this returns them to that place where I'm solving, my brain is literally trying to solve it all at one time. And people just come up with creative solutions at that time.
mm.
Like, oh,
Wow.
let's do this, which they hadn't thought of before, or they wouldn't have considered before, because they weren't feeling empathy for the other person before.
Wow, that's really deep. I to when I hear you talking about these concepts of we start out solving for both of us when we really want to make something work, and then when somebody becomes a problem, then we start solving for only for our own needs and forget about the other person's needs. You sound like a therapist. So, like, is this part of the training that you got in UCLA as a mediator or legal?
No, no,
Like, how did
no.
you figure all this out? Is this just
It's
your
two
ideas? Like,
ways. A lot of it is. So let me say three ways then. The
mhm,
first is that I had training in nonviolent communication, um, which was founded by a guy named Marshall Rosenberg. And he, from my standpoint, was pretty brilliant. And he developed a communication system. I won't go into it. It's really awkward.
mm,
It's hard to do, but at the core of the system was an understanding about what motivates human beings. And I'm always looking at what motivates human beings from like, there are only so many core motivations, and that was really helpful for me to understand that. So I did have some training in that. The second thing I would say is that years and years of practice, like, I completely modified his system, as anybody who's practicing a long time would, right? They put in what they've learned, and on top of that, the third thing is that I'm a very structural thinker. Like, that's just something that I've always enjoyed, about thinking systematically about how things are working, and particularly how the human mind is working. And so I just got really into it. I did a TED talk or TEDx talk on I don't know if you've watched it on what I believe the name was The Secret to Understanding Humans, and it really talks about human motivation. And so I've taken Marshall's work, and I've continued to develop it both through practice and just through really rigorous thinking. And then
mm.
I've written a book book about it that hopefully will come out next year. So it's a variety of things.
Nice. And that's Marshall Rosenberg, you said?
Yeah, nonviolent
Yeah.
communication.
I'm gonna look into that. I'm gonna try to get that book. And your book that's coming out, is that The Enemy's Trance? Is that, I think your daughter was telling me something about it.
Yeah, it's called the enemy dance. The enemy
The
dance.
Enemy Dance.
And
Yeah.
it is a beautiful tale about this. It's about a society. It answers the question about whether a society riven by tribalism forever, and it's getting worse, must descend really into war, or whether people who recognize what's happening can actually help them pull out of it. And
Nice.
it takes place in this fictional land 500 years ago in the Himbala, which is like the Himalaya. And there's this orphan. There's a boy who is born to Muslim parents, and it's an area where the Muslims, the Hindus, and the Buddhists all hate each other and have been fighting forever. And there's a boy who's born to Muslim parents, and they die, and he's brought up in a Hindu village where everybody hates him, and this old woman who adopts him, and he has deep insights into the human mind and the heart, and he wants to make a change in the world, and it's his effort to make peace in a
Yeah.
world where basically everybody hates him because he's not of any culture, and they're all fighting with each other.
Yeah. Well, I really want to know how this story ends.
It's
But
beautiful. It's
yeah,
beautiful, and I'll tell
I'm
you
sure.
this: that
Mhm.
in writing that story, it gave birth to the Enemies Project,
Hmm.
because I'm doing some of what he tried to do in
Oh,
his world.
yeah. Yeah, I understand. I really want to see how it ends, partly because I feel like we're in that story right now in the middle of it, and I want to see how this goes. What you're talking about reminds me very much of some of the interviews that we did in the peace issue, where we had, for example, some Israeli and Palestinian participants coming together to talk. I saw you had an episode on that too. We had the ones that we had already come to the idea of nonviolence. So it wasn't like they were already starting as sort of enemies, but we had, for example, a Hamas fighter and a an
Wow.
IDF soldier. Yeah.
Mhm.
But they had both left, their
Wow.
organizations
How did you find
to
them? How did you find them?
pursue nonviolence. So yeah, good question. So well, I started out by just researching nonviolent activists in Palestine specifically. In Israel, I knew there was a movement of conscientious objectors.
Mhm.
So I was able to find their movement, and it was easy to find those ones, the conscientious objectors, because they were all part of that organization called Misarvot
Mhm.
in Israel. They're called refuseniks. They go to jail for
Yeah.
refusing to join the IDF. And then I started doing research on Palestinian activists that were nonviolent activists, like this guy Ali Abu Awad. It's a little hard to see him in this picture, but we had him in conversation with one of the refuseniks. He's I would say the most, in my opinion, one of the most impactful nonviolence activists in Palestine, in the West Bank. But also through these people, they were connecting us with other people. Like this was called the Parents Circle. I don't know if you've heard of the Parents Circle.
I have
It's so there was we they always bring one bereaved Palestinian and one bereaved Israeli, meaning they had lost people in the war, together
Mm.
to talk, and they give talks
Oh,
in front of
wow.
people, but it's more of like a conversation instead of a talk, where they're
Mhm.
talking about their losses and talking to each
Yeah,
other and then talking to the audience,
that's beautiful.
and yeah, and we also had this Palestinian ex Hamas and ex IDF also talking about why they left
I
the path of
so
violence.
I just wanted to say what your
Yeah.
audience probably doesn't know,
Mm.
but I can see, is how much work what you did to get all those people together took. I mean, and I acknowledge that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That
Thank you. I
people,
appreciate it. I know
people
you're doing the same work.
don't know. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that was that's quite a magazine,
Oh,
that
thank you.
particular
Yeah.
one.
That
Yeah.
one took about 6 months, just for that magazine. This one is looking like it's gonna take 6 months also, the one for this year. They're not supposed to take that long. So we're usually late on our magazines, unfortunately, we're late on this one. But I'd rather get it right than, get it, on time, unfortunately, which is
Mhm.
not great for me as a, business owner, but it's
Mhm.
it creates good magazines anyway. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that, yeah, I see them as kind of like a book, I want it to be the way it's supposed to be, you know what I mean? I want it to be
Yeah.
impactful and
Yeah,
and really
and with
really help the
F.
world
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
help the world, rather than just being some fluffy thing, that you
Mhm.
just read in an afternoon and then just discard. Like, I want it to be something that changes people's lives. So
Mm.
and changes the world also, So, when you were talking about, this, boy that you're writing about, this, story, of a Muslim boy born into, a Hindu town and how he's able to heal the tribalism. One of the people that I came into contact with during the creation of the magazine, unfortunately, was after we already closed the content, so I didn't get to include them in it. Was an Arab Israeli, who is Arab but grew up in Israel, and she was talking about how because she was Arab and Israeli, like with the ethnicity of Arab and also the nationality of Israeli, she was able to see both sides and to be able to be a bridge, and that the Arab Israelis
Right.
can be the bridge, for that particular conflict because
Yeah.
they're on both
They're
sides. They
both.
have a
Yeah.
foot. They have a foot in both sides. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, that was just reminding me of that. I thought it was an interesting thing to note.
Mhm.
But I have
Yeah, yeah.
a
His name in the book, his name is Akbar, and
Akbar. Yeah.
he is a beautiful, beautiful character. Like
Mm.
I've come to fall in love with that kid.
Nice. Yeah, it
You know,
sounds
you
like
write
you
a
have
book
a
and you don't know how it's going to go, and the characters develop themselves in
yeah,
a
you
really
have a lot of empathy. You have empathy even for, non-existent humans. So I can see it. I can see it
yeah,
in your interviews, in
yeah.
your conversations. You've got a ton of empathy. And that's something that I guess I wanted to ask you about also, is, sorry, it's another one of my note cards. I have them spread out all over my computer here. Um, so empathy is one of the things that we were thinking about calling the next issue, the empathy issue. Another possible theme was the understanding issue. We have a few different possibilities. So just to give you some context, right? So this is the peace issue. This one over here was the powerful women in meditation issue. This one was the health issue. This one was the universe issue. So each one has a theme. And the theme of this one, I think that's what's really holding me back is I'm not even sure what the theme is because I'm
Mm,
really trying to figure out how to meet this moment, the 2025, in the most helpful possible way. Last year to me it was clear. I had no question about it. It was the peace issue. That was what was needed in that moment. In this moment, I'm having trouble figuring that out. And part of the reason is what I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, about where I see it as there's two big problems at the same time. At least that's how I feel about it. That there's the totalitarianism problem, which is scary. Are we moving into totalitarianism? Totalitarianism? Are we not? Um, and um, and the other is polarization and division. And so the first interview of this issue was Marianne Williamson. I don't know if you're aware of her. She was a presidential candidate in the 2020 debate. She was the one. I don't know if you watched any of the primary debates where Joe Biden was standing in the middle, and then you had all the Democrat candidates
I
spread out
didn't
across
watch
the
them.
stage.
No.
Didn't watch that one. Oh, okay. She stood up on the stage. Marianne Williamson is a spiritual teacher, meditation, spirituality teacher, and all the other candidates were kind of just going with their normal political talking points. And when she got her chance to talk, she said basically, in short, I'm kind of summarizing, but she basically said like, um, I see that what you're doing, you're using fear as a tool of politics, and I'm going to use love as a tool of politics, and love will win. And that was what she said on the stage. And that was like sort of the core of her argument. And then of course, a lot of people started sort of making fun of her and saying she was woo woo and whatever, and the media turned her into this woo woo character. But I think she's actually a very interesting character because I think that I've seen people on both sides of the political spectrum relating to her because she just brings it back to the core, which is love. And she was the first person I interviewed for this issue, and she was basically saying, essentially saying, trying to draw those comparisons between current administration, the current Trump administration, and the rise of the Nazi Party, and the fall of democracy in Germany in the 1940s. And she essentially she said the same thing on her show on the Hill. She has a show on the Hill. She's basically is like, the democracy is falling right now in the United States, and we're moving into fascism. And I thought, wow, okay, maybe this is how we need to meet the moment. We need to stop that from happening. We need to, or at least stand up against it. We need to. This should be the warrior issue, and because the last issue was the peace issue, this one will be the warrior issue, and we need
There's a
to
nice symmetry there. Yeah.
yeah, we try to do symmetry. So so we need to stand up. We need to figure out how to fight in a way that is bringing peace, but still standing for what we believe in. So that was sort of how I was thinking of it at the beginning. But then, as I was having more conversations with people, I started to realize that I had felt during that conversation that there was an alarmism there. And I was like, is this true? Is democracy falling right now? Do we need to stand up really hard, really strongly to say, no, we're going to fight against this? Is that the approach, or is there another approach that is more inclusive, that if half of the country believes that the opposite, that the Trump administration is helping against totalitarianism, is dismantling the deep state and all that stuff? Half of the country believes that. If we're going to stand up against this administration, we're essentially standing up against half of the country. So is that really an approach that's going to bring peace? And I was really struggling with that for a while. And then a lot of the conversations I was having, people were talking about how we can, bring unity and peace between the divided people of the country, and how we don't want to push away people that may believe that, for example, the Trump administration is doing the right things in the country to protect democracy rather than dismantle it. So the reason I see these two problems of totalitarianism and polarization, as I'm not sure how to attack them at the same time, is because if you attack the problem of totalitarianism by saying we need to stand up against the Trump administration, then you're actually creating more division, because you're pushing away people that that actually are really strongly in the Trumpian camp. And I so and it, but if you're saying, hey, let's like reduce polarization, let's like be nice to each other and kind to each other and like all get along, then you're not really standing up against the Trump administration. So I don't know which problem is the one that I need to focus on and to try to attack, and it's a little bit hard for me to figure that out. I'm leaning toward focusing on the polarization, because I feel
Well,
like that might be more
I
bringing
thought a
peace.
lot about that as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the connection between the two. And so I might have a way for you to reconcile those two.
Mm-hmm.
Might not, but that seems to be, you're I think asking this, or at least exploring this, in part because you're looking for views on how to reconcile it. And I think that people choose. I don't think people choose totalitarian or authoritarian or heavy-handed leadership when they believe the other side is an existential threat. Like, if just like you're kind of considering, like, we need to be kind of heavy-handed maybe in our resistance to totalitarianism. I mean, that's kind of like an existential threat to maybe our lives, but at the very least, our way of life. And so we need to have a heavy-handed response. We can't just be trampled. And so people, that's just natural. Like, you and I would both give up the idea of democracy in a heartbeat. If it meant saving the lives of hundreds of millions of people, or saving our families, probably. When we think there's an existential threat, none of that other stuff matters. And that's the power of totalitarian leaders, that they want the other side to do things that regard our side as evil. That gives us our power. And so, to the extent that we contribute to that, we buy into that, we're giving them their power. We're creating the authoritarianism that we're afraid of. I call people, I'm not going to say whether or not I believe Trump is this, but there are people in the media and in politics and that make their living from creating enemies. That's how they get their power. I call them enemy makers. And that is the source of their power, creating threat perception in my own people. I need my people to believe that they are a threat. Once my people believe that they are a threat, my people, all sorts of research indicates, my people, if they believe they're under threat, and particularly existential threat, where it's threat of death or really threat of the loss of the type of life that I valued, people will choose very heavy-handed leaders. They'll choose strong men, and they'll accept every type of corruption, because the alternative is we die. We'd all choose that. I'd choose that if the alternative was that I was going to die or my family was going to die. Yeah. It's like if there was a really bad disease that was infecting everybody, and there was kind of like a wishy-washy Congress, and they weren't going to put out a solution they weren't going to fund research, or they weren't going to put out the vaccine, we'd be like, give me a dictator. Let's defeat this disease.
It's essentially what happened during COVID. It's essentially what happened. Yeah.
And metaphorically, that's what's happening on both sides. But it's what happens in politics. So, and people understand this. There are leaders who understand this, both political and people in the media, who their model is, not only do I want my side to view the other side as bad, what I really want is for the other side to view my side as bad. I need my people to feel threatened. That's the juice.
Wow.
Because when they feel threatened, they choose me.
Wow. That's really powerful. So I think that if I sort of bring it back to the question of how we should approach this issue, it sounds like, obviously, based on what you just said, that you would lean toward fostering unity rather than standing up against a specific perceived threat, because by fostering unity, we create a foundation where people are not reaching out for totalitarian leaders, but rather looking for more of democratic solutions, since they don't feel that they're under threat anymore. By having,
and I don't know that I'd call it unity either, because the people on the other side may not be interested in unity. It's what I would say is that what I try to do on my program, at least, is I don't ask people to give up their passion. I don't want it to be some kind of like milquetoast middleism where nobody really hold on to their beliefs. If you're concerned about totalitarianism, speak it, but speak it in a way that can be heard, where you're really hearing the other side as well and what they're concerned about. Because like you saw in the totalitarianism episode, not that Jack and Matt, these two guys who are in this episode, are going to solve the issue, but they love each other. Right. And I did a second episode with them as well after the election.
I'm really excited to see that. I'm excited to see that one.
Yeah.
So,
but they don't give up their passion. It's not like if they're unified, it's against the thought that we are on opposite sides.
Yes. And that's actually what I'm thinking. If we do call it the unity issue, then it would be not that people should agree on everything, but that we should be united as brothers and sisters in humanity, and living beings, and not allow ourselves to be divided by divisive rhetoric and hate, and by those who would like to divide us.
We're being manipulated, basically. We are being manipulated. We are tools in a system. of enemy making. That's the way I see it. And it's not like everybody on the other side at the high level is intentionally enemy making. Some of them really believe it, but some of them, a lot of them, understand that if I create enemies, I have power, both
And you
in
think
media and in politics.
that was what I was going to ask you? Yeah, media or politics, but you're saying both. Yeah, I
It's the
agree.
same.
I think
Yeah,
that's
it's
true.
the same. And the ordinary people, like I say this a lot, but ordinary people of my enemy are not my enemy. They're just us on the other side. That's what the basic unity is from my perspective, that we've just been played.
Yeah, yeah,
We're and if you sit,
and
like these are people you'd want to like hang out with and, and go bowling with or go shooting with or whatever it is that you do or drink or meditate. These are people you'd have fun with and love. Isn't it crazy that we're on the other side of a civil war? Once you get to know them, you're like, I'm not going to do that. Like, you just happen to be over there. How did you end up over there? And
yeah,
I think Jack does a great job of talking about that in the episode. And in the second episode, they really explore this.
yeah. So, just as to get your opinion on this, basically, some of the um, titles for this issue that I've been contemplating on this side of, not letting go of the warrior idea at this point. Some
Mm-hmm.
of the titles that I've been thinking about are the unity issue, the empathy issue, the listening issue, the conversation issue, the balance issue. Those are some of the ones that I've been thinking about. Do any of those strike you as like really touching on the core of what is needed right now?
I'm not sure because it depends who your audience is. I mean, your audience is clearly going to be, it seems, a it's a it's a it's an audience that I would say is quite left. My guess is, and so the word empathy will appeal to them. If you use that word on the right, even though people want empathy, that word will turn them off because it's associated with certain DEI initiatives and other initiatives that they're opposed to.
Hmm.
But that word seems to me to be the most accurate. I want to tell you about the psychological theory that I have that is related to enemy makers, and maybe that'll provide a little bit of more insight into some naming. It might not, but in ordinary moments, are you interested in that with the
Yes,
theory?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, I am.
In ordinary moments, when we're having conversations with people, we're always empathizing with them on an unconscious level. Like if I fell down right now and, or I started like holding my lip, you'd be like, what happened? Did you bite your lip? Are you okay? You want to take a moment?
Mm.
Not only would you feel for me, but you'd understand what I was experiencing. And it's just because empathy is online, basically. You're naturally living my experience. That's one way we understand other people, through empathy. It's
Mm.
unconscious. Another way is through theories. Like um, uh, if you saw some weird stuff coming out of my lip that wasn't red, you'd have a theory like, oh, I read about that. That's green. You must be a Vulcan, or whatever it is. You'd have a theory, not that you've experienced it, but you'd have a theory about this. Those are the two ways that we understand other people: through theories and through direct experience of what we feel like they must be experiencing. And our brains process both of these at the same time. And if our theories are way off, empathy checks it and says that's not a human. That's not what he wants. Like if like that person, you'd say, oh, that person really just wants to eat dirt. Well, that's not a human motivation. Like, people don't really want to eat dirt. If they're eating dirt, there's a reason for them to eat dirt. It's something deeper, right? So if you're empathizing with somebody, you're going to dismiss certain theories. These two parts of your brain work together to make us pretty intelligent and understanding. Okay, when there's a threat, the empathic part completely shuts down. It's natural. If I'm threatening your family, it's not adaptive for you to feel for me. You got to protect your family. You're going to, if I'm going after your family with a knife or an axe, you're not going to be Mr. Empathy at that moment. You're going to take me out if you can. And that may not be true for certain people in the world who've really mastered themselves and have decided to live a different way, perhaps, but it's the natural response in human beings that empathy is going to shut down. It's completely adaptive. That's natural. So when empathy shuts down, what happens is you can no longer actually understand the other person. Not only are you not going to care about them and be willing to hurt them, but understand that the way we understand people and their motivations is through empathy. And when that shuts down and unintended consequences, you actually can't even understand what the other person's motivation is. So that's why Republicans think that Democrats, their motivation is just evil. They're just evil people. It's not even a human motivation, right? To be evil. It's not like you want something for yourself and your family. That's motivation. Evil is a judgment about other people. Or people come to the conclusion that when empathy is shut down, that your real desire is to hurt me. That's what you want. No, you don't want to hurt me. That's not a real desire. You want something for yourself and your family. But you can't you can't understand that you're wrong, that about what they really want, or you want to control me. That's not what they want. They want to control you for a reason, because they want something for themselves. But you can't process any of this because empathy is shut down. You don't know that your theories are wrong when empathy is shut down. So people on the other side of battles always come to the conclusion that the other side is evil. They want to hurt us. That's when you're threatened. That's just natural for human beings. So what enemy makers do is they create situations where, and I call that the enemy trance. So basically in the enemy trance, one further thing is that we become psychotic and autistic. We become psychotic and autistic. Autistic in that we can't feel what other people feel necessarily, and psychotic in that we can't care about them. Because when empathy shuts down, both things occur. So we become temporarily psychotic. We have psychotic autism temporarily. We're actually not, we're not of sound mind when we believe we're threatened. That's what happens. And so enemy makers want to create that state in us. Because when they create that state in us, we will choose them to lead us. And the most powerful way to create that state in a person is to share with what the other side is saying about you. That's why on MSNBC and on Fox News, they're constantly showing what the other side is saying about us and our side. Because this is my theory, as human beings evolve, the most threatening thing to us is judgments. Someone calling us immoral, someone calling us selfish, that means we'd be ejected from the group. And so on TV, we're constantly hearing that. And the other side is constantly saying that each side is constantly saying the other side sees us as evil.
Wow.
And so when we share our judgments with the other side, we're just giving them power, because they're going to echo that. They're going to show that clip where you called the other side, whatever you called them, selfish, where you told them off, where Hillary Clinton called the Republicans deplorables, where people were cheering it on. Well, that's why she lost the election, probably, from my perspective, because that's so motivated people on the right to follow a very strong leader. We're in the enemy trance, and the work that I do is to unravel the enemy trance.
Wow, it's very powerful. And now this leads me to some of my closing questions here, and I guess we'll have to be a little quick about it because we only have about 5 minutes, unfortunately. So just to wrap up this, my question here was about what to call this issue and what word really touches deepest on this topic. So you're kind of focusing on empathy, but as you said, that will turn off some people on the right. And my goal with this is to be able to reach everyone regardless of where they are in the political spectrum. And I know that maybe that's impossible, but I'm trying to think of a theme that will be unifying rather than divisive. So unity was one of the ones that I was thinking, but what about understanding? You keep using this word. You've said several times throughout the conversation, our conversation today, that first you're the one question that you feel is the most important in mediation was what is the one thing that the other person doesn't understand about you, or that doesn't understand that you want them to understand, and that's the most important question. What is it that they don't understand? Understanding also, to me, it like encapsulates empathy. um and you're sort of talking about understanding as the key. Do you feel like understanding is sort of the key here, or
I'm
that could
afraid
work
that
as a title?
if you use the title of understanding, it
Mm,
might it's technically accurate from my standpoint, but it might feel non-descriptive. It might
mm,
feel kind of amorphous. Like to you, it's powerful. To me, it's powerful. But I'm concerned because it's such a used word in our language that it
mm.
won't carry the power that you're
That it
hoping.
can be vague, right? It can be vague. It can be about
Yeah.
understanding different things, right? There's also clarity, truth, and what was the other one? Listening, and conversation. The conversation issue. Do any of those strike you as like hitting the mark?
I honestly want to think about it
Yeah,
and get
yeah. Get
back
back to
to you
me. It's a good idea.
because
Okay.
I feel like it's a really important issue, like from my standpoint, a super important issue,
Yeah.
and and I want, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I
get back
can't
to me on it. I think that's
answer.
a good idea, because we only have a couple more minutes now. So I want to ask you this other question that's really something that's on my mind and weighing on my heart a little bit. So one of recently I went out to do interviews at the No Kings protest here in Miami. So I went to do interviews because I wanted to get conversations with people on different parts of the political spectrum. I interviewed people that were at the rally to against Trump. I also interviewed people that had MAGA hats, and even a January 6th there that I found there. I was very excited to talk to that guy, and I felt like I had a really good conversation with him, kind of
Hmm.
like the what you do in your project. I really
Yeah.
felt like we understood each other, and I feel like I would hang out with that guy. But some people in our audience saw that I was there at the January, not the January 6th, at the No Kings rally, and then they just assumed that I was, you know, um, hateful toward Trump, or whatever. And I got a lot of messages, and even somebody who withdrew from our meditation teacher training program because she thought that I was taking a side. And obviously, I have an opinion. I have a perspective. I grew up in a certain um, place, and I have a certain perspective on the world. But usually, in the past, I've been doing what you do in your moderation, which is not taking a side, letting other people talk. But then I see, uh, sometimes I see that there are people that can have conversations, like really good conversations, while expressing their opinion. Joe Rogan is an example of that. He'll express his opinions while also
Hmm.
just kind of drawing out the opinions of others.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I thought, okay, let me try that, and let me just express my opinions a little bit. My perspective, but not in a way of like I'm trying to shut the other people down, in more of a way of I'm more in a way of like I'm trying to be transparent about where I'm coming from, what I think, and what I perceive, so that the other people that I'm talking to will be transparent as well. So I
Hmm.
guess my question to you that I wrote down is like, keep your opinions secret. Do you like do you
Oh, yeah.
keep your opinions secret and intentionally as part of like a strategy to not turn anybody away, and allow people to come together, or do you think that there's that it's a good idea to express your opinions in order to be more transparent? Like, what do you think about that?
I do keep my political opinions to myself. Uh, Not my personal life. I might speak to my family and my friends about it, but professionally, absolutely. Because for me, in order to have credibility, I need to be not perceived as bias in any way. That's my belief. Now, having said that, I also am of the belief that ordinary people on both sides, as I said, are good. I like them. I love them. So, I don't, so it's authentic that I really do perceive both sides as having good people. And, I don't view all leaders that way. Um, but that I don't speak very explicitly about, because it's important for me to have some neutrality. And the way I've said it is, there are people I know who have gone out to different protests, and they've said, you should really participate in that. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to participate, because my value is in bringing people together. We all have our own gifts, right? I remember speaking to some guy when I was trying to find Palestinians for the Israel Gaza piece, and they were saying, Larry, you're really, if you really want to help the world, help Gazans, join our side. That's how you help the world. And whether or not I agree with them or don't agree with them, I said, even if I agree with you, that's not my gift. I'll just be another person in your march. The gift that I have, or what I'm trying to bring to the world, is something else. And I plan to help you doing my something else.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That's such a really powerful answer. I really appreciate that. I'd love to dig into it, but maybe another time, because right now I have to go. But
Yeah.
I have one last question here, which is about your meditation practice. I know that your daughter told me you practice like a few minutes every morning, and that's what I mean. Not like a professional practice, but like that you have a little bit of meditation time in the morning. Um, by the way, did she represent that accurately? Like, do you meditate a little bit,
Yeah,
or what's?
I do. I do every day. I have for many
Mhm.
years.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I
cool.
do either 12 or 17 minutes.
What kind of meditation, if you don't mind me asking? Is it
So
like a
it's a hybrid. I've been to meditation retreats, and it's basically I focus on my breath, but then I do a lot of open awareness. And I have also listened for a long time to the what's the pot? There's a meditation app. Very Sam Harris's meditation app.
oh, you mean
Um,
Dan Harris or Sam Harris? They both
Sam
have
Harris. Sam
Sam
Harris.
Harris. Hmm.
So some of the techniques that he has used, but then I also use Calm, which is a meditation app, but mostly I don't use any of it anymore.
Mm.
I have a timer, and I sit quietly. I start with focusing on my breath. And really what I do is I try to find the anxiety in myself and just explore it,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
very quietly explore it. And if I don't do that, I usually have a non-intentional day, which doesn't go as well.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, that's powerful. It's you have deep insight into meditation, and one of the things that you were saying earlier about how you in the identity confusion practice that you do at the end of your interviews, that when people forget who they are, and they forget their beliefs, then they're able to be like truly human and really be able to inhabit any beliefs and have a truly open mind. Um,
Mm.
when you were talking about that, it really reminded me very much of deep spiritual teachings from meditation teachers and Eckhart Tolle, for example, and many others in the past who talk about sort of the ego being our idea of who we are, of ourselves, um, being sort of composed of beliefs essentially, and that there's when you experience ego death, for example, or just the falling away of ego, then you're just in the present moment, and your perception of and your perception of reality is unfiltered by this lens of ego and beliefs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
did you did you come to realize these things through meditation, or how does your meditation experience
So
interact
my
with
meditation does interact with it in a large way, but I've also, I don't know whether I can say this on here. You can edit it out if you. I've also done a lot of psychedelics,
hmm
and
yeah,
so
no, I
I
won't edit
have
that out.
experienced, what would be called ego death many times.
Mhm.
and that informs my daily life.
Yeah,
And
that's
that is
true.
deeply integrated into my meditation and into my work and my own uh, thoughts that, my own insight into what beliefs are.
Yeah, absolutely. Psychedelics really does open your mind. I have similar experience as well. And I think that psychedelics have shown me also a very similar thing. So to conclude here, I just wanted, I had written this down in the middle of the night and I just wanted to say this because I think it's beautiful. I think that there is a very strong reason that your channel is growing so fast right now, not just because you're very skilled at facilitating and that you're doing a great job of what you're doing, but also I think there is a hunger in the society right now for to break out of these bubbles that we're in. We feel trapped in sort of bubbles of our own design,
Yeah.
prisons. You could think of them mental prisons, and we realize that there is another side, and we realize that there is more to the story, and we feel this curiosity of like, what is outside of this bubble that I'm trapped in? And we crave this contact with the other side to understand the other side. And I think that's why Jubilee has grown so fast. They bring people together in this argumentative format, but people with different opinions. And I think what you're doing is the just a much better format and way of bringing people together, people with different opinions, but bringing them together in love and unity as brothers and in humanity. So thank you so much for what you're doing, Larry. I really appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.